Steve, what did you have this week?
Oh,
Jumping
yeah,
between devices here.
there was a really interesting report that came out. And just a little background, the New York court system established a little less than a year ago a commission to reimagine the future of New York's courts. And one of the working groups that was established as part of that was the Future Trials Working Group. And they came out with a report, and it was a really interesting report. They focused on four things: how to best evaluate emerging technology for court systems and lawyers that are litigating in the courts. Second, what areas of trial practice might be transformed by technology, and in that they can had a discussion of what future issues there may be that courts will have to grapple with. What's the impact of the best evidence rule, for example, on some of this technology? And they even included a discussion of technology that might be better able to assess whether somebody is lying or not, which may be a little far-fetched, but it struck me as really interesting that this committee was looking at it as an issue, and someday it may very well be an issue. They had a lengthy discussion of how jury trials might be conducted remotely, and they looked at the issues. They had some law in there. They cited some cases about constitutional issues, and then they did a little survey of states that have done jury trials remotely and what the results were. And then the last thing they do is they focused on training for judges. And I thought this was interesting too. They cited the ethical obligations of lawyers with respect to technology. And I know we talked about that a week or so ago. But then they went on to say, the judges have some duties to keep up with it as well. And so it was just a well done report and got to a lot of issues that make good reading for anybody that's interested in litigation in the court system, and even for litigators, because it brought out some issues that if you were involved in a remote proceeding in front of the court, particularly at the jury trial, some of the things you might want to think about. They had some recommendations in there for examination, such as everybody should have the same background, virtual background, so that one person's background doesn't look better than the others. And so you certainly kind of quarrel with some of their conclusions, maybe, or some of their thoughts. Really, but fewer conclusions than just raising issues. And it was a thought-provoking piece. The only thing that struck me a little bit about it was, sadly, they had to keep referencing, if we're going to study this, or we're going to look at this, or we're going to analyze this, we've got to get some money to do it. I mean, and that, of course, is always kind of an issue for court systems. But I would strongly recommend people taking a look at it and just reading through. And it's maybe 50 pages, if that. It's got an executive summary and got a lot of reference materials. And I was impressed by it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's interesting to me is we've talked a ton about, is this going to be sustainable post-pandemic? And while the jury's still out on that, it sure seems like the intention from a lot of places is to at least put some protocols in place to make it sustainable, money notwithstanding, and all of that. So by standardizing some of these things, I think that goes a long way to at least presenting it as an option moving forward, and what that means and how they allocate what would be remote and what wouldn't. There's a lot of work to do there, but it's a good stepping stone, I think, at least to start.
Yeah, they made an interesting point that, they said before the pandemic, courts were saying, well, maybe we can go from telephonic hearings to video hearings, and we'll slowly progress from that to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And now all of a sudden, boom, all the steps are here and present and need to be dealt with. And which is true. I mean, it took a pandemic, I guess, to focus courts on this. And sadly, though, I'm not sure other states are quite as focused on this as New York is. But yeah, it was good. very well done. I congratulate the working group that did this.
You know, the New York has done, there have been several working groups. I'm actually on another one of them for some reason, even though I'm not in New York, but there's one on technology in the courts that I think their report is about to come out. And there was another one we talked about earlier, and I'm trying to remember what that one was about. But it's been a really forward-looking process, I think, on the part of the New York courts to go through this discussions of these different issues and really try and think through how they should be, what kinds of changes they should be making, so it's good to see courts doing that. And you also touched on an issue that's one that I think is really important, which is the technology competence of judges. And I think I actually wrote an above the law column about this once, but it makes absolute sense that if lawyers are going to be subject to a duty to be competent in technology, by the same token, judges should be competent in technology, and maybe it's even more important in some cases that the judges have that degree of competence, and yet, you know, a number of them don't. And so I'm glad to see they touched on that. I haven't read the report yet, but I look forward to reading it.
I was just going to add in, there was another annual report that's out on from the National Center for State Courts, which has some information about all the work it did over the last year, which was pretty significant in evaluating what has been done so far, and really doing a good job documenting best practices and tests all over the country.